Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, as you're coming in to this webinar. Excited to have you here. We're just got it started a minute earlier. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the chat functionality is enabled, and we'll get started here in roughly a minute or two. Cindy, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling lucky, Sid. That's how I'm feeling.
I'm
Uh,
feeling lucky because I get an opportunity to talk with you again. This is awesome.
Woohoo!
I'm
Uh,
wearing my, requisite green, not getting
as am I.
pinched. Uh, I learned today that my children may be a part Irish. That's I did not realize that. I always, for whatever reason, thought that I didn't put together that Fitzgerald was actually an Irish name for the longest time. But more
Okay,
things that I know.
there you go. And yeah, no, it's a good day. I mean, we're about to see summer here in Colorado, where I am. It's going to be 80 degrees later this week. So
Yeah,
yeah,
on the heels of a snowstorm or like a freak snowstorm as well, right?
we didn't quite get what they got in the Northwest, but we did get snow on Sunday, overnight into Sunday. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, but that is Colorado. I wish we just had more moisture this year. It's alarmingly dry. So that's what we're worried about.
Got it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
we went from a, like, oh, I think spring is here, with 60s, since I'm in the DC area, and from the 60s and 70s to just yesterday having hail and a tornado alert, to now, sun's shining, everything's nice and beautiful. But it's going to be freezing again overnight, so it's all over the place. Well,
Crazy.
great. So I know we're a minute in, so we'll go ahead and get started with some introductions. Thank you, everyone, for making time during your lunch, during your breakfast, to come and listen into our conversation today. My name is Sid Pailla. I'm going to be your host today. I'll be having an amazing conversation with Cindy from WorkLife Partnership, who will introduce herself here briefly. The topic of our conversation today is going to be about emergency cash grants and emergency savings programs. In those moments where people don't feel lucky quite as much when those financial emergencies strike, and unfortunately, there's a lot of those financial emergencies nowadays for everyone. We're looking at what employers do to make sure that those employees are feeling lucky that they work with their employers. And at the end of the day, creating those moments that matter. Cindy, could you introduce yourself and work-life partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sid, for having the conversation today. I think it couldn't be more timely. There is a lot of stressors, I think, on the American household right now, and I think it puts shines more of a light on the need for emergency backstops when the unexpected arises. So, by way of introduction, I'm Cynthia Williams. I'm the executive director at WorkLife Partnership. WorkLife Partnership is an organization that comes alongside businesses to support their employees, no matter what may be happening. We primarily do that through our resource navigation program that we launched about 17 years ago now. And that looks like support with really anything and everything that can prevent an employee from showing up, being present, and successful at work. We do that work because we believe that a job and employment should be foundational to any opportunity for economic mobility. We partner with businesses across the country and their employees to remove those barriers to work success. And the outcomes really do look like a better retained workforce, a more engaged workforce, a more loyal workforce. So a lot to be said for providing that one-on-one support that we provide through our resource navigation program. But I'm not here to talk about the resource navigation program today, even though that's what I talk about most of my time. I'm here to talk about what is really evolved out of that program, which is our emergency grant program. So this started many years ago when we started to receive philanthropic dollars. We are actually a functioning nonprofit, but we started to receive philanthropic dollars to be able to provide emergency cash assistance to individuals when they were experiencing some sort of unexpected disruption, a car repair that they needed, eviction that they were trying to fight off, anything like that, that philanthropy wanted to throw supportive service, what they call supportive service dollars at. It also came alongside opportunities for us to provide sort of transitional funding to individuals who are maybe moving from one career to the next. Maybe they needed new clothing, safety apparel, boots, tools, those types of things. So really evolving out of that and sitting side by side with some of the data that we were putting in front of the employers that we work with came our emergency grant program. And what that looks like is funding that an employer provides to WorkLife Partnership in a number of different amounts, a number of different formats, always at the discretion of the employer, funded a lot of different ways, and I can talk about that a little bit more later, that we then distribute when an employee is experiencing something unexpected. And so that becomes that backstop for that employee who doesn't have emergency savings. And for context, about 2/3 of the individuals that we provided support to in 2025 didn't have even $300 saved to cover an emergency expense. So when that happens, an individual is going to be struggling. They're going to be turning to unsafe and predatory options. They may come to you as the employer and say, hey, can I get an advance on my paycheck? And so what we really are looking to do is provide a backstop so that we can help that person overcome that challenge and not spiral deeper into debt, do things like pull from their 401k, use high interest credit cards, those types of things that you have to resort to when you just don't have a lot of money set aside for an emergency.
Cindy, that's a great background. Thank you so much. We've used the word emergency a couple of times, so I just wanted to paint a picture of what that actually looks like across the states. And just for context, because of the work that we're doing, we have seen the data across almost 2,000 employers, and we are able to understand what wages look like, but also what reported financial emergencies look like. And survey after survey continues to find that roughly 4 in 5 people in the US have experienced a financial emergency of greater than $1,000. So just think about that, keep that in the back of your mind. It's not a one-off event. It's not like, hey, just that one random person encountered this. It actually is most of us end up going through this at some point over the course of the year, maybe several times during the year. The typical financial emergency ends up being around $1,500. And also for context, according to Bankrate, roughly 3 in 5 folks don't have more than $1,000 saved up for those emergencies. And so, you have this aspect of things unexpectedly are happening. We are not prepared for the unexpected. Those folks are clearly working. And when the unexpected happens, that then does impact the employer because now they are not showing up to work when we thought that they were going to. Now they are potentially looking for a job elsewhere overnight. Now they are stressed and making mistakes, sometimes potentially costly or even fatal mistakes, as we found out with a couple folks that we talked to recently. So these things do flow out of hand fairly quickly. So when we're talking about financial emergencies, this is impacting labor across America right now.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
Emergency cash grants, Cindy, like when this is a concept that's been around for not just decades, so for a very long time. The general idea, from my understanding, is that for a limited set of categories or use cases, the employees apply to say something bad happened. Can you help me out? And they end up receiving a grant that typically is unrestricted to be used in terms of what they need, but it's restricted in the sense of what may have caused a financial emergency. Now, I might have completely butchered that, but maybe could you paint a picture of what this actually looks like for one of your employers that's launched the program?
Yeah, so I'll use an example of a manufacturing employer has 1,200 employees. And they actually have 2 programs, really interestingly enough. The first is one that they funded several years ago that came out of their corporate budget. And essentially that was designed to do exactly what you just described, Sid. When an employee was experiencing something that was disruptive, they wanted bespoke funds that could address that. They turned to WorkLife Partnership as a trusted third party to distribute that funding, because they wanted to remove the risk, they wanted to remove the liability, they wanted to remove the any perception that there could be bias in who receives funding and who doesn't, and also because when you bring it through a third party like WorkLife partnership, it's no longer it's no longer taxable on the individual's payroll. So we partner with them to then basically work with the individuals who may be experiencing one of those needs and distribute funding when we can't find other resources. So that's the other piece that's a little interesting about how we work is we're not just an ATM machine. In fact, my team says a lot to me, like, we don't want to just do that. We want to do the whole thing, which is we want to work with the individual to figure out if there's other resources available that can come side by side with that cash assistance so that we're actually minimizing the amount of money that we're drawing from what is a finite fund at the end of the day, and finding other resources that can maybe be blended and braided for that individual. What that looks like really simply, and it is really, really simply, is the individual reaches out to us, they talk to a navigator works with them to figure out if there's other resources, and ultimately then we distribute the payment. We actually pay vendors directly, so if someone comes to us and they need a car repaired, we'll actually pay the car repair shop directly. So we are knowing that the money is going where, we all expect it to be going. The employer sets the requirements. In this case, there's not a lot of requirements. They don't have a set of, only for childcare or only for a healthcare
This is
emergency.
the manufacturing company.
This is the manufacturing,
but
exactly.
like more broadly, other companies can set those requirements. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's another example. We work with another manufacturing company who actually just wants it to go to transportation, right? So that's their pinch point, right? They see a lot of work disruption because of transportation issues. And so they say, here's a pot of money. We want it to be distributed when someone is experiencing some disruption with their transportation, whether that's a car repair, mass transit, whatever that might be. But in this case, they have a pretty broad perspective on what it can be used for. The thing is, too, that employers can actually do this directly. There is tax code that allows an employer to provide hardship funding to an employee tax-free if something arises. Those events are usually catastrophic. It is something like a total loss in a house fire. It is damage from a weather event. It's those types of things. And so this allows for money to be distributed more flexibly for the day-to-day things that we all know can really impact someone, on the job. The interesting thing about this employer is that they actually had a senior level salesperson who, I'm not sure why, but took it upon himself to launch a separate fund that sits side by side. And that fund is specifically for the women workers in their workforce. And so he and 3 other individual donors inside of their workforce have set up a separate fund. They launched it with about just under $10,000 to provide for support specifically when a woman in their workforce was experiencing some sort of financial emergency. And so it's just an example of how, employees often want to fund things for their colleagues as much as the employer might as well. So really interesting, we have these 2 funds kind of sitting side by side in that one workforce, which opens up, actually a decent amount of money for us to be able to tap into when we're working with someone who's experiencing some sort of an emergency.
That's great, Cindy, and thank you for that. And it's always great to see employees being proactive. That's a great culture to be built, and
Oh,
that's amazing. Now, I think one of the things that I picked up from what you said is, yes, there's a whole risk component, but at the end of the day, it's not just about providing money. It's making sure that there's dedicated time to ensure that the individual who's experiencing not just a financial emergency, but kind of the trauma associated with that is receiving the resources to navigate through that moment and then take the next step, right? So I think that it's, especially when we talk with employers, there's a tendency, and it's not just employers, like cities or states too. Like there's this tendency to believe it's like, oh, we can do this ourselves, but there is a significant amount of time and effort and technology that goes into this. So I think I certainly appreciate that. You talked about some of the impact, operational impact. Could you share some of like the positive stories that might have come out of this? Obviously, nothing that would reveal any kind of detail, but perhaps what kind of outcomes that the employers may have seen out of your programs?
Well, I'll start with one of the stories that we share about an employee we served and supported in Phoenix. So she worked in a mental and behavioral health care facility. She herself had struggled with behavioral mental health and had actually been living in transitional housing and was moving back to her own apartment. And she had nothing. She really didn't have anything. And so we were able to deploy resources to help her kind of rebuild, right? Get the
Hmm.
essentials for her new apartment, the sheets, the bedding, the pots, the pans, those types of things. And that's life changing for someone because, yes, you can go and try to find those things really affordably, but that's money then you don't necessarily have to put toward next month's rent or security deposit. And so just to kind of illustrate where that money kind of plugs in to help individuals. We also saw a lot of this. This is going back now, obviously, but there were a number of individuals who experienced a lot of disruption during the pandemic. And so we were able to use these cash grants to help them kind of weather those work disruptions, whether that was a temporary furlough or whatever that was. And so we were using it in that way as well. So helping folks really stay on track. What we see on the other side, flip side, in the employer, and certainly more so even when these are employer funded, is that it creates a deep loyalty. The individual believes and knows and sees that their employer understands that life is not perfect and there are bumps in the road, and the employer is thinking really constructively about ways that they can support the individual as they're going through those things. And so that shows up over and over and over again in testimonials and comments that I feel like my employer sees me. I feel like my employer wants to support me. I'm so grateful I have access to this type of benefit. So it really does breed a lot of loyalty, I think, because they just feel like they're being invested in. And that's, I think that's huge for culture. It's huge for retention. It's also huge for word of mouth, right? Like, oh my gosh, did you know that our employer has this incredible program that you can take advantage of? And I think you probably see that on your side too, Sid, with
Hmm.
Sunny Day Fund, and sort of what's that word of mouth influence as people realize like sort of this great program that they have access to. So yeah, so huge impact, I think, both on the employee and then for the employer in terms of the culture that they're really trying to create.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was talking to someone yesterday who used that term culture creator, culture curator, and ultimately it's that culture that brings us back to continue to, drive forward with whatever the workplace's mission is, right? I think that's extremely powerful. We just got certified yesterday as a great place to, not yesterday, sometime earlier last week or whatnot, as a great place to work, and
Awesome.
that's certainly been a
Congrats.
fun journey. Thank you. It's been a fun and meaningful journey, and just learned a whole lot about things along the way. But good to know that we're doing a lot of things right. I did have one last question for you, Cindy, and you mentioned Sunny Day Fund, so we can pivot there from there. Is
Yeah.
I'm sure that employers are thinking about, okay, well, what does this look like from an economics and budget perspective? So have you seen, like, do you have any kind of rough numbers for, like, if I'm a 1,000 person organization, like what are other 1,000 person organizations or 10,000 person organizations or 500 person organizations, like whatever you may have, like what are they doing in terms of setting aside how much money to afford a program like this?
Yeah, I don't think I can answer the question directly the way you asked it, but I think what we see more often than not is employers are deploying what they can, and they're pulling that from different places. So in some cases, there is a bespoke fund that they have for this type of thing. They've been experiencing it over the years, and they're just looking to kind of get out of the business of distributing it. And so they're like, here's this money, we set it aside every year, it's in our budget, go distribute it. And then they set the parameters. Is it a $500 max? Is it a $350 max? What can it be used for? In other instances, they actually have a contribution through payroll. So individuals are contributing $5 a paycheck, small incremental amounts that add up. And so that is a little bit more variable. So we may not get the same amount every single quarter to distribute, but we're working with what we receive, which is By the way, one of the reasons why we like to come around the individual is so that we can make sure that we're stretching the finite emergency dollars as far as they can go across as many members of the workforce as possible. Certainly, we would advocate as much as you can based on your workforce, what you've seen in terms of needs, what the demographics are, what the pay rate is, honestly. But we also know resources are finite, and so we can work with whatever you have to distribute. We will work with that, and then make it, I think, multiply it by layering in those other resources from the outside that our resource navigators are able to tap into.
Yeah, great. And I know that following the meeting, we'll be sharing some resources to give you a further idea of what that looks like.
Yep.
And on the emergency cash grant side, as well as from the Sunny Day Fund side, I understand that there's maybe getting ahead of my holiday seasons here, a little Easter egg or a pot of gold, whatever we want to go with here in there. So please make sure to keep an eye out for that. Why don't I describe Sunny Day Fund a bit, because I think that it's a nice tie-in to what you're talking about from an emergency perspective. Specifically, what we are focused on is enabling, automating, and incentivizing workplace emergency savings. So the way you can think about it is, if Cindy is a firefighter when the house is on fire and you got to go and respond, we're basically the Army Corps of Engineers, that's making sure that every house is as fireproof as it can possibly be. Like, you need both things at the end of the day to make because if you don't have houses that are fireproof, you're only going to be firefighting all the time, and that can, of course, be intense and also incentivize the wrong type of behavior, right? So on the other side, making sure that people who don't have emergency savings are set up to save up for those emergencies directly from the paycheck into a brand new account in less than 30 seconds with a high yield interest rate, and something that employers typically put in a couple $100s towards as well. We've found that ends up creating a really engaging experience where roughly 40 to 60% of the whole population ends up participating in. So that's where it's a nice 1-2 punch, right? Because at the end of the day, there's the ultimate security blanket that you have, ultimate safety net that you have with someone who's truly going through a traumatic event, getting the help from an emergency cash grant, but everyone else, we're nudging them to make sure that they're able to pay themselves first and take care of themselves personally as well. So I know, during the prep call, Cindy, you had a couple questions for me on
Yeah.
how our program is going. So I'll let you ask them.
Yeah, no, I think the first thing you mentioned that employers throwing in a few $100s, is an employer, when they work with Sunny Day Fund, are they required to contribute, or is there a minimum that they have to contribute? And honestly, actually, another question is there a minimum or maximum that the employee can contribute as well?
Yeah, great set of questions. So remember, this is unlike the emergency cash grant, which is, is something where the employee does not need to pay taxes on as they're receiving that from, foundation capital, effectively. On our side, this is their own post-tax dollars that's going into their own savings account that we open for them, right? So it's a whole. Think of us as like a 401k light, where the money is not being invested in the market. Of course, it's sitting in a high yield savings account. So typically, most employers end up saying we want to create that the barrier to saving as low as possible, non-existent if possible, and that looks like as little as $5 per paycheck going into their weekly, biweekly, semi-monthly paycheck, right? And across the board, just FYI, last year we saw roughly $211 on average that employees are putting away on a monthly basis. So this is pretty significant because the vast majority of the people that are on Sunny Day Fund are making sub 6-figure wages, right? So we end up calculating it out to be roughly 3 to 4% of their post-tax wallet share, which is, again, very significant and good. It's a good signal that roughly half of your population is doing that. On the maximum side, employers do sometimes set a maximum per paycheck contribution because they want to make sure that the employee is also taking advantage, if they're not already, on the 401k and HSA side. And the
Mhm.
nice thing about what we were doing is we're nudging that too, right? We want people to take advantage of enabling their own retirement security or their health security if that ends up being an option for them. So we've heard that continuously be provided as great feedback to us, saying like hey, and thank you for helping to communicate those other programs from your perspective. On the employer, so what are employers providing as an incentive for the saving piece? Typically, most employers do a $25 to $50 sign-up bonus. So after the employee puts in their first contribution, the month after that, they typically, or the quarter after that, they typically get that sign-up bonus. And it's not required by any means, but most employers also do an additional up to $200 to $400 per person per year. What's been really interesting to see is how employers are rethinking how they're doing compensation. So if they're doing an annual bonus of some kind or a retention bonus of some kind or gift cards of some kind, they're realizing that the value of that can be multiplied by depositing it into this savings program, which is going towards shoring up the employee from a financial security and emergency savings sense. But as you know, Cindy, like this, like you can save up for not just emergencies, but additional financial goals, like going on a vacation, putting down a security deposit to move into a new apartment. So enabling that near-term financial trajectory is something that works really well too.
And is the employee fully vested in the employer contribution as soon as it hits their account?
Yeah, so simplicity is
It's
the name of the
amazing.
game in our case, right? So the money that they see is the money that they're tapping, and so as soon as the funds are deposited by the employer, by our partner bank, in terms of interest earned, employees can tap that right away. There's a lot of behavioral mechanisms that certainly reinforce better savings behavior, but ultimately, when an employee needs it, they can tap that.
I mean, the what struck me there, Sid, with the numbers you quoted is that really within 6 months, individuals have that emergency amount that,
Yeah.
you know, most often emergencies are, this $1,000 to $1,500 saved and set aside. And now they're not feeling like they're, really scrambling to figure it out. And the other thing that's really amazing about it is just tapping into some work that we've done in the past is the set it and forget it for employees, I think for all of us, is really, really critical. Once you're used to not seeing that $25, $40, $50 a month, you adapt to it really easily, and you don't have to think about, okay, now I have to transfer that $75 over into my savings account, right? It's actually just happening automatically for you. And I think your yield is better than anything any of us can get on a standard savings account anyway. So I think that's amazing. One other question I have for you is it portable? So is it, do you have to cash it out if you leave your employer? What happens there?
Yeah, it's absolutely portable. And this is one of the magical moments as well, right? So, termination, when you think about it, obviously a very significant component with any employee's journey. So, if it as soon as the termination happens, they are able to tap Sunny Day Fund, and that money can go with them to another employer that is also offering Sunny Day Fund too, if they so choose. They can close the account anytime that they want as well. So there's no restrictions of any kind over there. So again, that the money goes with them. But also, when we detect that there has been a change in employment status, we do that gentle communication to say, hey, before you try to drain your retirement savings, make sure you're looking at your Sunny Day Fund first to tap whatever is there. And that is extremely important because that's a way to preserve that individual's retirement security. Because a lot of the reason that those retirement early withdrawals end up happening is because of that post termination. So it ends up being really nice. And by the way, because we're on that topic, what we have seen in general is that turnover among the savers on Sunny Day Fund has been across the board of all the employers that have rolled it out, been less than the overall eligible participation pool. And remember, we can actually prove this at because we have the payroll data, right? So we were
Right,
able to say like, okay, here's the eligible population,
right.
starting out. Here's how it's going month over month, and here's what the turnover has been looking like. So we were just doing this. You're based in Denver. We were doing this with a senior living company recently with and I feel like they're coming up on 1,000 employees here, and they had a turnover that was roughly half the amount in their saver pool versus their overall pool. We just did an analysis on a manufacturing company that launched with us over the course of the last 4 months, and in their hourly population, turnover was a third of what it was over the non-participant pool. So it's this really cool thing where we're able to prove out that it's obviously having an individual level impact, but of course the cost of turnover still is a significant cost even in this job market for any employer, and we were able to prove that out.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, again, it's twofold, especially if the employer is contributing. There's a loyalty measure, but also it's sticky, right? Anything that we can do from an employer standpoint that makes it harder for someone to go across the street for 50 more cents an hour, I think is a good thing. So yeah, I think that's amazing. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. So yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Cindy. And we'll be sharing more opportunities across some states and other things that are coming up in some other webinars. So for the attendees that have tuned into today's session, where we're covering emergency cash grants and a brief look at how emergency savings could work, please stay tuned for more webinars that are coming from us. And also, please pay attention to the follow-up email that you're going to be getting, because in that email you'll see a deeper dive into the emergency cash grants and the emergency savings. And as I noted, there's a nice little pot of gold that's buried in there too, in case this is something that you choose to pursue in the future as well. But hopefully this has been a fun introduction, Cindy. Wish you a very lucky and sunny day
Thank
today.
you.
Thanks for
Back
and
at you.
I appreciate it. And to everyone that joined us today, thank you so much. And you too, have a lucky sunny day. Bye.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.